What it is, cuts this. Happy Memorial Day from your boy. Shout out to the armed forces. Thank you for your service. Let's get to this shitty episode of Monday Night Raw. Monday Night MIDcard, because everybody here was a mid-carder or below. This is unacceptable. We need at minimum 1 star on this show, but more on that later. And just think about what I said. A minimum of 1 star. In the past, you would have like 10 stars show up at various points of the night. Now, we have a bunch of mid-carders and 2 shitty comedians making an appearance. But before we jump the gun and before we put the cart before the horse, I'm willing to bet my hat, motherfucks, that this review, like many others, will be conducted in similar hater fashion, which means one thing, and that is that it's gonna be segment by segment. All right, we start out, Rollins and friends come out. Bronson and Braun, I'm gonna fuck this up so many times. It's not my fault. One of them is named Braun, the other one is named Bronson. That right there should tell you how shitty creative is. They come out, they're dressed in suits, Heyman comes out, and then starts talking. He makes a weird point about, I think he fucked it up, because he was like, if the Terminator came from the future, he would tell you that Braun Breaker will main event WrestleManias. What? I think he probably wanted to say something like, if the Terminator, which would be Braun, or something like that, right? To connect him to a menacing force. Right? To an unforeseeable, motherfucks, right? As well as unprecedented force, an undeniable main event. But instead he says, if the Terminator came and told you what's going to happen in the future, he would tell you that, like, that's what the Terminator would do? He would go and kill Sarah Connor. That's what he would do. He wouldn't go and talk to you about the WrestleMania 46, which will be 17 days, so that they can crack the attendance record and that nobody's going to give a flying fuck about. That's not what the Terminator would tell you. The Terminator would come back and probably kidnap Lee Fitting and Triple H so that we get some good wrestling up in this bitch if he is to do anything wrestling related. This is an example, in my opinion, of how mediocre Paul Heyman is on the mic. He is vastly overrated, as I've said before, and this proves it. Then he says that Bronson Reed is also there. Then he gives the mic to Seth Rollins. Meanwhile, the fans, as these jobbers came out, did the whole, singing, the whoa. And then afterwards, because the fans are a bunch of man-children, they start chanting, fuck you, Rollins. And Rollins is like, why do you have to use profanity? Like, what the fuck? What kind of a champion or would-be champion is this dork anyways, right? Like, The Rock or Jericho or someone who's good on the mic would be like, shut your mouths, The Rock is speaking. Or Jericho might say something intelligent or funny, like, look at all these people here in whatever the fuck they were, right? Everyone would cheer. And he would say, and each and every one of them a jackass. And everyone would boo. Seth Rollins doesn't have this in him. He's not good enough. So he does what he knows, which is just complain. I'm the future, right? Anyways, so he basically says he's going to join the Money in the Bank qualifying match tonight. He's going to win that. Then he's going to win the Money in the Bank ladder match. And eventually he's going to cash in, but nobody will know when or on whom. I mean, obviously, right? That's kind of the point of the Money in the Bank. I guess this segment was acceptable in the sense that Seth Rollins did say something that we didn't know, and that is that he's going to be in the Money in the Bank ladder match, but I mean, who cares? We would find this out when the match started anyways, so the segment is still a complete bust. After this, we have another Money in the Bank qualifying match, right, which must be viewed, in my opinion, in the context of the main event. This match involved not 1 mid-carder, not 2 mid-carders, not 3 mid-carders, but 0 mid-carders, because absolutely everyone in this match is an undercard jobber who will never achieve anything in this industry. The match was between Gable, Dragon Lee, who hasn't been seen on TV in about 7 months, and Penta. Penta botches a move at one point. He does like the gory hold, like not the driver. He puts him in the gory hold, right? He puts Phoenix in the gory hold, and then he picks up Chad Gable in like effectively like a J driller, right? But then he ends up just tiger driving Gable on his face, nearly killing him. You know what I mean? This move should be reserved for people that have the strength to do it. Penta is not strong enough to hold up 2 men. He's not John Cena. He's not even Eric Young. So with that being said, I didn't like that, right? The match is going on. Cole and Pat McAfee keep talking about El Gran Luchador, or El Grande Americano, I should say. It'd be cool. I'm not going to lie, if like next week on Raw they have another qualifying match and it's El Grande Americano in it and he wins and he joins the match. That'd be pretty fun. But as Chad Gable goes up to the top rope, he gets attacked by El Hijo de Vikingo, who hates him because like they're going to be on YouTube in a few weeks, right? He kicks him. This leads to Chad Gable being tied up, or caught up, I should say, in the Tree of Woe position, at which point Dragon Lee gets up and does like a double foot stomp a la Alberto Del Rio. Then, as he jumps off of him, he gets Mexican destroyed by Penta, who then picks up the dead Chad Gable and hits the Penta driver to win. Penta wins, nobody cares. Next up, we have a backstage segment with the Judgment Day. This, at some point, needs to go away, right? We get it. The Judgment Day, you can bet your hat that the Judgment Day will always have a segment on Monday Night Raw, and they do. Roxanne Perez flirts with Dominic and gives him like a tray of like a million nuggets as Liv returns and is all pissed off because Raquel has kept her, I guess like in tune with what's been going on in the clubhouse, right? After this, we have the long-awaited match between Tozawa and Rusev. Rusev machkas Tozawa, and not one person cares. Rusev got absolutely no reaction. Nobody cares about Rusev. This is like 10 years too late. There was a point where Rusev was like 28, 29, you know what I mean? And he had like 10 years ahead of him where he should have gotten pushed if he was ever going to get pushed. The longer I keep seeing Rusev, the more I realize that Vince McMahon was once again correct. Right? The philosophy that Vince McMahon ruined Rusev is absurd, because we see Rusev now, there's no Vince McMahon, and Rusev sucks. So Rusev beats him, and then Sheamus comes out. Sheamus is like, he's a mid-carder now, but Sheamus is a legend and a soon-to-be Hall of Famer. Sheamus just rules. I've always liked Sheamus. He always puts on good matches. He can put on a good match with like fucking, what's his face, Hornswoggle, and he can put on an excellent match with Big Show. Sheamus is vastly underrated. He has a lot of cool moves. He obviously has a cool look, and he's still going hard. You know what I mean? Sheamus deserves more props. Sheamus should be in the main event. I don't know why he isn't. Obviously it's going to be him versus Rusev at some point, probably in about 3 weeks, because that's just how it is. Rusev just wrestles once every 3 or 4 weeks, and then you have to like hold off on him, because he has like a Machka promo to cut every single week, like a backstage vignette type promo, right? Eventually, I'm sure Rusev is going to beat Sheamus, which is a tragedy, if you ask me, cuckolds. A tragedy. But that's what happens. What can you do? You know what I mean? After this, we have a segment with the two unfunny fucks, Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. Tom Segura's first special was pretty good. After that, he's just gone downhill. He's one of those like Rogan sphere comedians. Both of them are, right? Joe Rogan. I mean, look, Joe Rogan is a funny guy, but he's just not a very good stand-up comic, right? There is a comedy scene that never included these jobbers, right? The New York, if you will, comedy scene, like the Opie and Anthony crowd. I'm talking about like Colin Quinn, Jim Norton, Voss, Patrice O'Neal, to a lesser extent, Bill Burr. He was always like the ass of the joke. He was never considered that funny during those days. And of course, none of those guys that I just mentioned have made it to mainstream because they actually are funny. Like Jim Norton is fucking hilarious. Colin Quinn's one of the greatest comics of all time. Patrice O'Neal was one of the greatest comics before he passed away at a very young age. You know what I mean? These guys were supposed to be big deals, but because they're not fucking sellouts, including Nick DiPaolo, I should say that, right? They make jokes that are actually funny. They offend people, and then nobody puts them on the mainstream. While lesser comics like Kevin Hart and Tom Segura and Bill Burr make millions of dollars doing this middle-of-the-road comedy for people that aren't funny, right? Like for the accountant at your office. That's the kind of guy that likes Bill Burr. Nobody funny likes these people. They are comedians for the middle-of-the-road mothers and fathers who loosen up their fucking collars. At one point, they take off their cufflinks, they go see a Bill Burr show, and they laugh, or a Kevin Hart show, and they laugh because, like, he's relatable, he's funny because he's small, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of bullshit, you know what I mean? Like, none of these guys would ever cut it in the WWE on comedy alone. Like, The Rock is funnier than everyone that just mentioned naturally. But anyways, I digress. So these two guys show up and they have like, again, exactly what you'd expect. A middle-of-the-road comedy segment. Tom Segura, is out there like being confused. Bert Kreischer takes off his shirt and starts like hanging out with the War Raiders, and they smack him on the chest. And then afterwards, Tom Segura says, "That must have hurt." He says, "Haha, yeah." And then Tom Segura says, "Let's go to our seats. I hope we can find a medic." It's like, what the fuck? Who wrote this shit? You know what I mean? How about be funny, motherfucker? But anyways, that's how that went down. I didn't like it at all. And then it's time for the tag match. The only good thing from that segment was that the fact that we can now suppose that the tag match is coming up next as the War Raiders were ready to go. The tag match starts, it's complete shit. There was one spot that I enjoyed, which was Brutus Creed doing a springboard Brutus ball for no reason onto like one of the Viking Raiders. The finish of the match is complete garbage. Basically, Xavier Woods just rolls up Julius Creed, who's in the middle rope. He just rolls him up and like grabs the tights and they win, right? The thing about this is that like, if you really think about it, like the New Day now is completely boring, right? They're not entertaining. They have the potential to be, right? Like, in my opinion, the New Day should be coming out every week cutting a promo because they actually are funny, especially Kofi Kingston, who I believe is very underrated on the mic. Or at least put him on commentary. I understand once in a while they actually have to wrestle, but I mean, we've seen them wrestle for like 10 years now. It's getting stale. I'd like for them to do something different, you know? And this is different, but it's not good. Like, if you think about how amazing the New Day turning on Big E was, that was one of the best moments that's probably the best moment of the year last year, right? It was so good. Everyone, including Big E, who had like a smaller role in this, everyone was so on point with their promo delivery. It was so well done that even though you know it's bullshit, like they're all friends in real life, you felt bad for Big E. You know what I mean? And that's a very powerful element of wrestling, right? Making you feel things, right? Making you relate to the wrestlers sometimes. Not for dumbass reasons, like they want to tell you, oh, you know, like I have to relate to her because she's a woman. Oh, this guy looks like me. He's fat and a loser like me, Kevin Owens. So I relate to him. Oh, we need like Kofi Kingston to win because like a black person hasn't won the WWE title in a while. Like, you don't need to relate on people based on gender, race, ethnicity, or even nationality. You can relate to them situationally speaking, right? And the New Day segment, which was awesome, was very relatable. But look how far they've fallen since then, cuckwads. Now, with that being said, we continue on to the next segment. Liv talks shit to Kyrie, who challenges her in broken English. After this, Jey Uso comes out and does his Uso shtick. It is what it is. This is something that just happens on Raw now every single time, for better or for worse. Personally, I'm over it, but the fans seem to like it. So there is something to be said about that. And when I say they seem to like it, they seem to really like it, right? The fans are always into this. You know, it's not like when Seth Rollins comes out where people are like, okay, great. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. You know, this is a little bit better than that. It's a bit more engaging than that. So therefore, I respect it, you know? Gunther comes out. That's something I don't respect. And Gunther basically proceeds to bore everyone to death. Gunther cuts the same promo he's been cutting for about 7 months. First, he cut it on Cucky, and then he started cutting it on Jey Uso. He says that I'm better than you. You're not a fitting champion, not to be confused with Lee Fitting, which is a different problem, right? He's like, you're not fit to be champion. And he says, Jey Uso, I don't think you're intellectually capable of even understanding what I'm saying, which was a pretty interesting dig, considering that Jey Uso does come out looking like a retard, and Gunther is supposed to be this intellectually superior European, even though that's never been like addressed at all, right? Basically, Jey Uso, he responds in the most reasonable way possible. He says, "You done?" Right? And then like Gunther just looks at him and says, "You done?" Right? And basically, Jey Uso says, I'm tired of everyone saying that my days are numbered. And I don't blame him, right? I'm not saying I don't blame him because Jey Uso is this great champion. He obviously isn't. But I don't blame him because that's all everyone says to him. Maybe it's because the Jey Uso character is so generic, right, that they have nothing to say to him, right? Gunther, he can sit down for 3 hours and think about, what am I going to say to Jey Uso? But what can you say? You can make fun of him for being a tag team jobber for like the entirety of his career until now. Or you can make fun of him for being a sycophant to the crowd, right? But a lot of people are sycophants to the crowd. And, that's basically what Randy Orton would do to John Cena. He'd be like, Cena, I don't care what these people think about me. And like that, whatever. We've seen that feud, right? Part of it is Jey Uso's fault. But the big part is not Gunther's fault, but it's the fault of the producer, the person that thought this was like a worthwhile segment. Because it's like, there's nothing new that you can say to Jey Uso. It's like that last scene in 8 Mile starring Eminem and the guy who I always consider to be called Clarence, who now plays like Captain America or whatever, the guy from Twisted Metal, the black guy. He's actually, I like him. He's the closest to Will Smith in terms of like that Will Smith charisma, but it sucks because he's not Will Smith and he's derivative, so he's not as good as Will Smith, but that's a pretty high bar, I mean, obviously, Will Smith can go fuck himself for what he did to Chris Rock, but it doesn't change the fact that Will Smith, personally, was one of my favorite people of all time before that. So, anyways, like in 8 Mile, basically Eminem has to do a rap battle against Clarence, played by the aforementioned actor, right? And Eminem basically like says all the bad things about himself that he anticipates Clarence will say, right? He says I'm a piece of white trash, I live with my mom, blah, blah, blah. He says all the things that Clarence is going to say. Then he makes fun of Clarence, and Clarence chokes, right? This is the same situation we have with Jey Uso. You can't say anything to Jey Uso because he's already said it all about himself. He's already said he's a jobber. He's already said he loves the people, and he says that again. However, I will say this. In my personal opinion, and this is going to be a little controversial, but I believe Jey Uso to be a very relatable guy on a natural level. The character is whatever, but the way that Jey Uso has been booked for the last several years make him very relatable. Now, I personally believe he'd be better off winning the Intercontinental title because no matter what he says or what anyone says, his title run does feel like it's coming to an end sooner rather than later, right? But Jey Uso is very, very relatable, I personally believe, right? First of all, he started out with Roman Reigns, and he was like, kind of against him in the beginning. You all know the story. I'm not going to run through it again, right? But after everyone in the bloodline eventually turned on him, this is like 2 WrestleManias ago, and he wrestled Jimmy Uso. When he went out on his own, he got the new theme song, which I think is the best theme song in the WWE. Not because of the yeet and because of the dancing, but because because the lyrics say, "It's just me, Us." Day one-ish, right? Because it's like the whole point of the day one-ish thing is that he was never alone. He always had his twin, right? But now it's just him, right? And I think we all can relate to that a little bit, right? You lose out on a friendship, someone turns their back on you, and it feels like all you got is yourself. So Jey Uso is relatable in that extent. Now, obviously, the character has been bastardized because now he's got like a million friends, as Gunther points out. But nevertheless, right, he's relatable on that level, right? He represents the guy who had everyone turn their back on him, and then he had to go and start from zero, ultimately earning back the friendships and the love of the people that he cares about and becoming the champion, right? So that's pretty inspiring. I mean, again, I'm not saying this is like written to the level of Jericho versus Christian, but it's better than like, for example, Finn Balor, right? Or Sami Zayn, who have no character, no direction, no raison d'etre, no reason to be there at all, if you ask me. Anyways, that's how that went down. After this, we get a little plug for Cucky Rhodes' new, I think it's a podcast, to be honest. I kind of skipped through it. But his first guest is his wife. Nobody cares, right? After this, we've got the Liv Morgan-Kairi Sane match. Liv is wearing the red, bodysuit. Now, a lot of people like this bodysuit. I personally don't care too much for it. And the reason why is because I personally think that it is more interesting and more thorough for wrestlers to wear the same thing or nearly the same thing every single time they wrestle, right? I'll give you a great example. In one of the early SmackDown games, like SmackDown 3 Just Bring It or whatever, right? Kurt Angle had multiple costumes in the game. One of them was like his regular red, white, and blue. The other one was his red and he was bald, right? Because in the storyline he had been shaved. That's interesting and that's a costume change that merits another skin, right? But beyond that, in the video games, they pick the one classic, get up that the wrestler has, right? For a long time, Shawn Michaels still had the heart pants on the video games, even though he didn't wrestle like that, right? Because the idea is the wrestler's supposed to have something iconic. So you look at them and you're like, this is that guy, right? You see Shawn Michaels with the heart pants and you're not going to think, who is that? Is that Stevie Richards? They look very similar. No, you're going to think that's Shawn fucking Michaels. You know what I'm saying? Same thing with The Undertaker. He would wear the leather pants and the black tank top for a large part of his Dead Man #2 run, right? Earlier, he would wear the bodysuit kind of with the tank top that went around his neck, like a turtleneck tank top. Then, of course, as American Badass, he would wear jeans, right? A t-shirt, and then usually a vest of some sort, right? He would dress up in a costume. You've got Kane. Kane had some costume changes, but he only wore 3 costumes his entire career, right? You had The Rock and Stone Cold, who just look different, right? As compared to the other wrestlers. And then you have generic wrestlers like Val Venus, who was great, but he wore the Val Venus attire, right? It's like you would know immediately by looking at him. He's got long hair. Not a lot of people have long hair back then. He's got like the goatee. He's got like the trunks with a V on it. That's Val Venus. You know, a great example of this that I think will solidify my point is Chyna. Chyna, pretty much, she had like, you know, low-level costume changes, but she had a very unique look, right? She had this like get up that was almost like warlike, right? Like Xena the Warrior Princess. She was obviously going for that, you know what I mean? Which was a big show in the 90s for those that don't know. You know, and every time you see her, you're like, that's Chyna, right? Eddie Guerrero, he would have a very distinct look almost always. Obviously, you have people like Rey Mysterio, very distinct look, you know? But the idea was that you could just look immediately and be like, that's that person. This week, Liv Morgan comes out with the red. Tomorrow, she might come out with booty shorts and fucking just like a t-shirt that says live forever or some bullshit like that, right? And it's like, you're like, who the fuck is that, right? Kairi Sane, you look at her, she's just a Japanese girl with hair in like a million colors and who wears tassels. It could be Julia. It could be Io Sky. It could be a returning Asuka. You can't tell just by looking at her who it is, right? Because they all dress the same. You know, even Trish Stratus, who had some costume changes, her get-up was usually, black, like leather pants and a tank top that would accentuate her cleavage, right? Lita had the thong that would peek out. These are things that seem irrelevant but are very important, right? If someone looks different every single week, that better be part of their gimmick, like Seth Rollins. No, I mean, that's a horrible gimmick, but at least it's consistent in that sense, right? So, for example, next week, you don't want Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed to come out wearing singlets, right? They need to stick to their suits, you know? And again, it's okay to have some changes. Sometimes Eddie Guerrero would wear like black tights that said Latino heat in fire, and sometimes he would wear like that, and it would say like I'm your papi or something like that, right? Doesn't matter. The point is, generally speaking, you could tell who is who by looking at their gear. Like if you cut off Eddie Guerrero's head, right? If the camera didn't catch his head, you could look at his physique and his costume and know for certain that is Eddie Guerrero. Nowadays, everyone looks the same and everyone wrestles the same, so you wouldn't be able to tell if it's Finn Balor or Seth Rollins, right? I mean, you would because Seth Rollins is a little chubby, but you understand what I'm saying for the most part, right? Next up, after this match concludes with, surprisingly, Kairi Sane winning. The reason that she wins, or I guess the way that she wins, is because Roxanne Perez and Raquel argue at ringside and Liv gets rolled up. Like, I don't even know how this is like Raquel's fault, right? She gets distracted, but it's like, focus on the match, bitch. It's not like she got distracted and then like, I don't know, fucking like Asuka, made her return and hit her with a belt, allowing Kairi to win, right? It was just a match. So anyways, I personally have always thought that one of the cool things they could have done with Judgment Day would be to make it this like Latino takeover stable, right? Where all of a sudden they introduce more and more Latino wrestlers, right? To the point where the Latino wrestlers outnumber the non-Latino wrestlers and then the Latinos just take over, right? This could still work. For example, if Roxanne Perez, supplants Liv Morgan as like the main woman in their faction, right? You already have Carlito, you already have Dom. The mistake of getting rid of Damian Priest is unforgivable because, obviously Dominic and Carlito cannot, or even them and Roxanne Perez and Raquel cannot lead a faction. That's just like a faction of jobbers, right? You would need like one credible world heavyweight champion type, wrestler in there. And for now, it's Finn Balor. He sucks, but he is what he is, right? But like, that's how it should have gone, right? We had Damian Priest slowly. They just like, because if you remember, the way that it was introduced was like, all of a sudden, Carlito starts hanging out with Dom, like Raquel Rodriguez comes in. They just like plant some seeds, and that would have been cool. It would have given the fucking, the faction something interesting, right? They could even call it the Great Replacement Theory. That'd be pretty funny, a little bit too on the cheek, but I thought that would be a good move that would give a bunch of Latino wrestlers something meaningful to do, right? Because Latino wrestlers come in hierarchies, right? You have your Angel Garzas, and then you have your Dominic Mysterios, right? Dominic Mysterio may be Latino, but that's not very relevant in his gimmick, right? Same thing with Carlito. Carlito, even when he was like Carlito, the Intercontinental Champion, him being Latino was irrelevant. He just happened to be Latino. Same thing with Roxanne Perez and Raquel Rodriguez, right? They're not out there just dancing the salsa. They just happen to be two Latinas, and it's as simple as that, right? But I think that'd be interesting. They just got to hire like one big Brazilian or something, I don't know, to make it interesting. But, it's also not a great idea within the context of having too many Latino factions that are complete jobbers. But this would be interesting, right? But anyways, that is what that is. Nobody gives a flying fuck Otherwise, after this, we get a vignette for Rhea Ripley about her saying she's going to win the Money in the Bank. That's because Rhea Ripley cannot be bothered to show up to work. But who cares? I skipped the rest of the vignette because I knew what she was saying. You know what I'm saying? After this, Lyra Valkyria comes out. She's completely unrecognizable, right? This is exactly the problem that I have. You can't show up one day wearing chicken wings, right? And then the next day just dressed like a normal broad. You know, like, I never liked that. Even during like the Main Event Mafia, which is one of my favorite factions of all time, and other Sting appearances, like Sting would come out in a suit, right? Which was consistent with the Main Event Mafia, but he'd come out in a suit and glasses, and then later on he'd show up with face paint, and it's like, I just saw you without face paint. Like, why are you putting this on? You know what I mean? And he wasn't, it's not like he turned into a different character. He was still Sting, you know? It was really weird, but it's the same thing here, except there's no face paint, right? Like, the face paint gimmick, I need to do a video about that, like, in and of itself, because it's very fucking annoying. It's going to be a video on costumes and the importance of presentation. But let's move on. This segment goes on for way too long. Nobody cares at all about what Lyra is saying. She's boring as shit on the mic. She's got nothing going for her. She's not a bad-looking girl by any means, but the point is that she's just so generic. She is literally girl next door. And that might itself be a reasonable gimmick if the company wasn't filled with the girl next door, right? If the company was filled with Trish Stratuses and Alitas, then, and like, you know, you had like a Bianca Belair and a Rhea Ripley in there to show some muscle, right? Then the girl next door would be very, very, very relatable. But you have Liv Morgan as the girl next door. You have Lyra Valkyria as the girl next door. You have like fucking, what was her name? Dakota Kai as the girl next door. Just a bunch of jobbers that nobody cares about. She basically says she's beaten Becky many, many times. Becky Lynch comes out. She's 100 times better than Lyra Valkyria on the mic. And she says to Lyra, like, if I beat you at Money in the Bank, she effectively challenges her to a match. If I beat you, I'm going to be champion. But if I don't, I'm never challenging you again for the Intercontinental title. Like, who the fuck cares about the Intercontinental title? She can go to SmackDown and challenge for the US title. But then she says that if she wins, she wants Lyra to, like, raise her hand. Like, what a shitty stipulation, you know what I mean? Why don't you just have a kiss me arse match while you're at it? They're both Irish, you know, so they can just keep talking about, I want you to kiss me arse. You know, kiss me arse match, motherfucker. Bring it back. You know, we had it with Dolph Ziggler and Sheamus, which was fucking weird. But if you have the two girls, at least that'll excite the neckbeards a little bit. But anyways, I didn't like this at all. Lyra says like, oh, I'm still better than you, whatever. Complete waste of time. Lyra's just a complete failure. After this, we have Sami Zayn walking backstage towards his match, right? Karrion Kross talks to him. Karrion Kross does what he's been doing for about 7 months, which is fucking never wrestle. And then he just says, hey, man, like, things aren't going to go your way. Sami Zayn says, I don't have time for this shit, right? And he's like, I'll deal with you later, right? Who cares? Karrion Kross, like, this is what this guy's been reduced to, you know what I mean? He is clearly the lowest ranking member of the male roster, right there with Ludwig Kaiser, so nobody cares about him at all. Speaking of Ludwig Kaiser, just remember, whatever happened to Ludwig Kaiser, like, you know, his interview, like, you know what I mean? Ludwig Kaiser should be just repackaged as an insurance salesman. He can be called Ludwig Kaiser Permanente. I just came up with that right now on the fly, motherfucks. That's how creative your boy is. After this, they play stereotypical Mexican music to push the Worlds Collide event. I almost called it a pay-per-view, but it's a YouTube event. Nobody's gonna watch this. Nobody cares. I bet you when it's live, it's gonna have like less than 10,000 people watching. You know what I mean? After this, we have the main event match, which is another Money in the Bank qualifying match. This is a problem, right? You can say what you want, but the reality is that the main event match is the same as the Penta match, right? Which was 3 undercard jobbers. In this case, it's 3 mid-carders, right? But it doesn't change much. There's not one main eventer here. Furthermore, it's a triple threat match. Seth Rollins just won what everyone was calling the greatest triple threat match in WrestleMania history. It obviously isn't, but that's what they were booking it as, right? So it's like, if Seth Rollins can beat Roman Reigns and CM Punk, even though he did it with shenanigans, right? Well, you should bet your hat that he's going to beat these two nobodies, right? Finn Balor hasn't won a match on Raw in like 6 years. Like, when was the last time Finn Balor won anything meaningful? I can't remember, motherfucks. I think there was a one WrestleMania where it was like him, Lashley, and Rollins for the IC title. What a complete disaster that was. But anyways, like, he's a complete jobber. Then on the other hand, you have Sami Zayn, whose entire career is him not being good enough to do anything of value, right? And just like Karrion Kross said, he was right. Sami's not going to win the title, at least not with the Money in the Bank. I could totally see Sami Zayn winning the title once, which would be a complete travesty. But whatever, right? The match is what you'd expect. Everyone gets their spot in. and nothing really happens. There's a part where Balor hits the Nightmare on Elm Street, or the Final Cut. Finn Balor doesn't have a name for this move, but don't worry, because Pat McAfee says, Sling Blade! So you got the move wrong completely, right? Eventually, Finn Balor hits the real Sling Blade, and Cole says it, right? At some point, Pat and Cole say if Rollins loses, his faction is a failure. Think about that. The faction with Seth Rollins is so bad that losing one match just, renders them completely moot. But anyways, there's a part where Seth Rollins no-sells the Blue Thunder Bomb, right? He gets Blue Thunder Bomb, and basically, as Sami Zayn pins him in the Blue Thunder Bomb, Sami Zayn does what he normally does, which is raise one arm. Seth Rollins is struggling the whole time, right? You'd think this is a roll-up. This is a relatively high-impact move. And if he's struggling, Sami Zayn shouldn't raise his arm. He should try to use the arm to hold him down. Presumably, Sami Zayn raises his arm when he does the Blue Thunder Power Bomb, because the idea is the win is in the bag, even though he's only won one match with it, right? After this, Balor is nowhere to be seen. A few moments before the Blue Thunder Bomb, Seth Rollins hit the mid-card pedigree on Balor. Pinned him, but Sami Zayn broke it up. Then he hit the mid-card pedigree, which is what I'm calling Seth Rollins' version of the shitty pedigree, right? Because it never gets anything other than a 2 count. He hit the pedigree on Sami Zayn, who kicked out at 2. Now, with that being said, he then wrestles Sami Zayn for about 5 minutes. Eventually, Finn finally reemerges, only to get stomped. As he gets stomped, Sami Haluva kicks Seth Rollins, and pins him, right? Then he gets saved by Braun Breaker, thereby completely ruining everything, right? Braun Breaker has to pull Sami Zayn's ass from the pin, or he pulled Seth Rollins. I don't know. He broke up the pin from the outside, right? Which really goes to show that, why would they even associate with Seth Rollins? He can't even beat Sami Zayn. Braun Breaker has beaten Sami Zayn 100 times. Bronson Reed has beaten Seth Rollins' ass dozens of times at this point, right? Why are they associating with this loser who can't even beat Finn Balor and Sami Zayn? You know what I mean? Doesn't make any sense. But they interfere. They start destroying everybody. Then Jey Uso comes out of nowhere, right? Because he's the champion. They got to set up him versus Seth Rollins at some point, right? But he's also friends with Sami Zayn. So he comes and he effectively neutralizes the Braun and Bronson connection, right? He super kicks them all. They're all shitty super kicks. Then Rollins kind of grabs his head and he gets flattened out as well, right? Then in the match, Dominic appears, grabs a chair and throws it in the middle between Finn Balor and Seth Rollins, right? The announcers make a point about how he threw the chair all shitty, right? That was the point of the spot. The point was he should have thrown it to Finn, but he threw it more in the middle, right? And Finn crawls towards the chair. Rollins just no-sells everything, gets up, and just fucking stomps Finn on the chair, pinning his jobber ass. After this, Seth says, get everybody and let's whoop their ass. But as this is happening, CM Punk's music hits, and Braun and Bronson go towards the entrance. CM Punk cleverly appears from behind, does the worst-looking go to sleep to Seth Rollins, and then eventually runs away, right? The question here is, why didn't CM Punk do this during the match? In other words, why not cost Seth Rollins the Money in the Bank qualifying match to really piss him off? Instead, CM Punk, all he wanted to do was just get in one move on him, and he ran away, right? It was really weak, especially considering everything that's been happening with him and Jey Uso, right? Even though now he's a jobber, but him and Jey Uso have been friends. They keep dropping each other's name. Jey Uso warned me about Paul Heyman, You'd think that he'd care a little bit about Jey Uso and his longtime friend Sami Zayn, but that wasn't the case. CM Punk's a selfish ass, and this match proved it. But it didn't matter. Who cares if he got an attack in on Seth Rollins? Seth Rollins whooped his ass many, many times, and Seth Rollins qualified for the Money in the Bank. Now, if, for example, CM Punk costs Seth Rollins the Money in the Bank, ladder match, then that would be interesting. However, I would want that to happen because I don't want Seth Rollins winning it. And I think that at this point, Seth Rollins has to be the favorite, right? It really, at this point, I hope it's LA Knight, obviously, but if I had to bet, I'd bet on Seth Rollins just because he's Seth Rollins. You know what I mean? He's being pushed right now, and also he's got 2 guys that are going to help him. So, Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu are both going to qualify. They're going to neutralize each other. That leaves, at this point, Penta, who has no chance of winning, LA Knight, who should win, and Seth Rollins, who becomes the favorite, right? I hope that LA Knight wins. I don't care if Drew McIntyre. I don't care if CM Punk. I don't care if fucking Becky Lynch comes and tips the ladder to screw Seth Rollins. I really hope someone does. But beyond that, I got nothing more to say about this show. You can bet your ass, and by ass I mean hat, you can bet your hat that the haters going to keep doing this until this shit gets good, cuckolds, which might mean the haters going to be doing this forever. And with that being said, go fuck yourselves.